Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah, everyone. Good morning or afternoon or evening, depending where you are in the world. Welcome and thank you for joining us for the launch of our Tech Talk series, where we try to go beyond the buzzwords and explore not just the technologies shaping our world, but also the moral, ethical, and even the spiritual or Islamic questions that arise. Now, over the past few decades, we witnessed a breathtaking transformation from dial-up internet to smartphones from static websites to real-time global collaboration. If you're a software engineer, you know this very well. You could be working with somebody that's across the globe in real time on GitHub, or you could connect to the internet almost anywhere in the world, right? Whereas 10 years ago or 15 years ago, that wasn't really the case. Technology has rewritten how we live, how we work, how we think. Jobs have been created with, Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, things that maybe 15 years ago you wouldn't have even comprehended or even imagined. But now the pace has been more rapid than ever before, especially in the last 2 years with the rise of artificial intelligence, or everyone's favorite word, AI. AI is not writing code. There's not compilers that have AI assistants. ChatGPT can create a whole website for you, right? AI is composing music, is diagnosing illnesses, is even mimicking human creativity. And we're still only scratching the surface. Behind the scenes, deeper waves of innovation are already forming: quantum computing, neurotechnology, synthetic biology, and extended reality. It's no longer science fiction. These are no longer conspiracy theories. This is actually real and it's happening. And they're part of what's often referred to as deep tech. Radical solutions rooted in cutting edge science, capable of reshaping literally our entire societies, our entire lives, entire industries. But with such power comes profound responsibility. What does it mean to be human in the world of machine intelligence? Where do we draw ethical boundaries where our brains can interface with computers, or where decisions are delegated to algorithms? If you have a self-driving car and you're about to get into a car accident, does the algorithm save the life of the driver or the life of the passenger? Right? How do our moral, social, even Islamic religious frameworks adapt or resist in the face of such change? Now, these aren't theoretical questions anymore. They affect real people, real communities, future generations, and that's why we're here today. Not just to learn about the technology, but to reflect on its direction and our role in shaping it. And honestly, we're honored today to have an amazing panel of experts who are technologists and students of knowledge, and they will guide us through both the promise and the pitfalls of these emerging technologies. Now, whether you're here as a student, a professional, a parent, simply, someone who's curious. Our goal is to empower you and to move beyond from being a passive consumer to an active, informed participant in the future that's literally unfolding before us. So, just a little introduction. My name is Naveed Shah. I am a graduate student at the Islamic Seminary of America, and I will be your host for today. Our first panelist is Yusuf Khan. Yusuf, and by the way, literally, this is not like I didn't say we're here with a panel of experts as like just some clumsy marketing. I really mean it. Check out his bio. Yusuf is a senior director of AI and automation technologies for a leading global tech services company. He is an experienced senior leader with over 18 years of expertise in digital transformation, AI, automation, and business strategy across different industries, working with both startups and some of the top Fortune 500 companies. He is also pursuing his master's in Islamic studies at the Islamic Seminary of America. That's where we met. That's how I know him. Our second panelist, and this is a long time coming. I've been itching to have a podcast with Dr. Shoaib, is Dr. Shoaib Malik. Dr. Shoaib Ahmed Malik is a lecturer in science and religion at the University of Edinburgh with a PhD in chemical engineering from the University of Nottingham, if I pronounce that right. And check this out, a second PhD in theology from the University of St. Mary's. That's amazing. SubhanAllah. Dr. Shoaib stands at the crossroads of science and religion. His monograph work, Islam and Evolution, Al-Ghazali and the Modern Evolutionary Paradigm, was acclaimed as the foremost academic contribution to the field of science and religion, receiving recognition from the International Society for Science and Religion in 2022. He is working to develop the infrastructure for Islam and science. So let's jump right into it. First topic of today, parallel reality or simulated reality. So now I want you to imagine a world where the boundaries between what's real and what's digitally constructed begins to blur. I mean, right now you can kind of you know when something is AI made, right? You kind of know when something is deepfake. But imagine a world where you can no longer tell, where experiences, identities, environments can be simulated so accurately and so convincingly that the line between physical and virtual becomes almost indistinguishable. Welcome to the realm of parallel or simulated reality, a concept once again reserved for science fiction. Now it's actually inching very close to science fact and reality. From immersive metaverse environments, hyper-realistic digital twins, AI-generated worlds, and quantum simulations, technology is now allowing us to recreate and reimagine reality at a level of detail and interactivity we've never seen before. But as we enter this frontier, new questions arise. What's real? Who controls the simulation? Who's in charge? How do ethics, identity, and accessibility evolve in such a reality? So our topic is we're going to explore the technologies driving simulated realities and how they're impacting industries and human behavior, and what it means to build or live in a world that exists in parallel to our own. So I'll hand it over to Yusuf Khan.
Jazakallah, brother. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So, from a tech perspective, there's a lot to unpack here. So, let's divide this in two separate topics. The first one being simulated reality, and the second one being parallel reality. So, talking about simulated reality first, from a tech perspective, they are no longer speculative. They're already here. They are in various degrees of sophistication. At one end, we have the consumer level experiences through virtual and augmented reality, like we see in video games, right? In Meta's Horizon World or Apple's Vision Pro. Now, these are designed for immersive gaming experiences. On the other hand, we have enterprise level simulations used in industries such as aerospace, manufacturing, urban planning, and healthcare. Now, these solve complex real world problems in real time. Now, technically speaking, these systems have been there for some time now. They are constantly evolving, and currently they are at a point where it's very effective, and there are some very good use cases across different segments. Now, how real it is? The environments are becoming more and more visually and physically convincing, but more importantly, they have started to feel responsive with the ingestion of AI. Now, with the help of AI, the AI avatars can now mimic emotional responses. They adapt to the behavior, the way you talk to them, the way you engage with them. And based on that, you get very personalized custom responses, whether you're talking to a chat GPT or your virtual bot. Now, the use cases are constantly evolving. On the positive side, it's used in different areas. We mentioned some of those. I'll give you an example on imagine surgeons training in a risk-free virtual operating rooms, or you simulate the emergency room responses for first responders and just how you deal in such situations, right? Someone is in the training mode right after their studies, or you provide mental health support in calming and controlled environments for practitioners to practice on in real life scenarios. Now, all of these are extremely helpful use cases, and students can now practice this before they start talking to actual patients. So it gives them the confidence, it gives them the level of understandability on what to expect. And again, with AI, you can now expand on this where it's not scripted anymore, and it's more real time, right? Now, from a student's perspective, we can explore ancient civilizations and complex molecular structures in an immersive 3D kind of a setup, which kind of levels up your education and learning experience. Now, on the concern side, there are various concerns that are constantly raised, and there are various ethical flags as well. When you talk about virtual reality as it pertains to the gaming industry, and we know the huge investments that have gone in the gaming industry to make these games more and more addictive, especially for the youth and for the kids. Now, that itself is a huge topic, and we touched upon some of that in our previous session. But at the same time, it's blurring the boundaries between what's real and what's fake and what's simulation. And these questions keep coming up both from users as how do we tackle this? How do we differentiate everything that we are seeing? Is it real? Is it all AI? And if that's the case, then the truth is getting altered on a real-time basis. And it just, blows our mind on what to believe and what not to believe. So there's a lot to unpack here, even from an ethical constraint standpoint. But commenting purely from a tech standpoint, yes, the tech is here. There are some good advancements that have happened, especially in the last 5 years, and more specifically in the last couple of years with AI. There's some good use cases where it's being used ethically and being used responsibly as well. But then companies who are creating these solutions, and as users, there are various things to keep into mind. For example, from a company standpoint, who owns the data? How do we exploit the data, right? In the garb of personalized recommendations, are companies then using the data to really make the ad industry more pertinent to what you're doing on a daily basis? And then this kind of blurs the line on what's allowed and not allowed, right? Imagine just recommendations coming to you for everything that you talk about at home to your friends, and then you see pop-ups on your phone with recommendations on someone selling one thing or the other, right? So that's a real concern. It's no longer a conspiracy theory. Also, from governance and accountability standpoints, there are some various valid questions to be asked. And then it's all about consent, right? As users, we have to be very careful on what consent we are giving. If you're downloading an app, just as a best practice, don't accept to everything blindly in terms of sharing your information, sharing data between apps. We have to be really careful. And my last comment would be for the parents. You have to be mindful on what your kids are using, even if they are young kids or teens. Keep a watch on the apps that they're using, whom they're engaging with, because that itself is, first of all, we can keep certain things in mind and may have the sense to stop sharing certain information at some point, but for the kids it would be just everything. There are various security concerns as well that come along with it. So my closing comment is we have to be responsible users. Yes, there is good in all these tech, but then from an Islamic perspective as well, we have to define where do we draw the line. And I will let Dr. Shoaib comment on some of the ethical aspects there.
I just like to preface this with Naveed, mashallah. That was an amazing preamble. That was so solidly executed, mashallah. I've never seen such a sharp introduction. So really kudos to you. I'd like to just start off with a general claim that all of this is really just brand new stuff that is accelerating at the speed of light. And so when we want to theologically and jurisprudentially appropriate these conversations, we have to keep in mind that there's a process of deliberation, and that takes time. That is not an overnight, like a switch on speed. And so I think that because the ramifications of AI are still being acknowledged, I think some people were very skeptical when ChatGPT first came out. I remember I remember when ChatGPT first started off, and there was this I think it was a Bangladeshi student as part of his MSc program. He launched something called Hadith GPT. You guys remember that Hadith GPT episode? And it created so much controversy that ulama around the world asked him, please shut this down. It is causing fitna. And I remember the reason why that was a problem back then is because he just put the Sunni hadiths into an LLM, and people were starting to use it for fatwas and all of that. And that was, I think, the first, at least for me, the first light bulb moment, like, whoa, 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 whoa. We are now being accelerated to the future. It's no longer like a 10, 20 years thing from now. It's here and now. And I think that with the whole simulated realities that we're facing, I think things are going to become a lot more pervasive, right? So, mashallah, Brother Yusuf mentioned that at least on the technological front, these things are getting more realistic, right? Immersion is being much, much more, I'd say, veridical. You're not able to kind of distinguish between reality and what's virtual. I still can. I get headaches when I put on the gizmos. So, but I know that's a generational thing. I think the new kids, when they're being trained on this, they're gonna have this issue. But I think from the theological side, first and foremost, I think the general rules of what is and isn't allowed should be clear, right? Like gender interactions should be clear. In terms of sexual ethics, that should be clear. All of that should be very, very clear. But then there are a lot of interesting new gray lines that are emerging. And the way I think about these theologically speaking, and I don't like to give definitives. One, I'm not a faqih. I mostly deal with the philosophical and theological stuff. But I would like to give you some interesting things to think about. One thing I'd like to share is movies are excellent sources for thinking about imaginal futures. So there's a really good movie called Ready Player One. Yusuf, Naveed, I'm assuming you've seen that movie. Yeah? Oh, astaghfirullah movies? No. So,
I'm the most boring person you'll ever meet, trust me.
all right. Okay. So Ready Player One, for those of you who've never seen that movie, I strongly recommend that. I strongly recommend parents watch that. And that's because the whole movie is predicated upon that your entire life, livelihood, social activities are entirely in a virtual space, right? So if you wanted to earn a living, you put on your goggles and you start generating money, right? And because it's virtual space, you can do so many crazy things. And it was such a weird feeling to watch this movie because you can think that, whoa, this is a potential reality that we might be heading towards. And I started thinking about how aligned is this with the Islamic ethos, right? Are we supposed to be just couch potatoes, put on Google glasses, right, or whatever, and then just go into a scenario where, khalas, this is life. It's all digital now. I think that has very damaging consequences. One, I think you've alerted Yusuf about the idea of constantly being distracted from diversion, right? Shaykh Hussein Nasr, he's like one of the first generation guys of Islam and science. He has this very simple example, at least in his time, the mobile thing was a big thing, right? He saw the shift from no mobile to mobile, right? And this thing, really, honest to God, it is one of the most distracting things in the world, right? I mean, how many of us, do dhikr more than they check their WhatsApp? Very few, I would say. I would say very, very, very few, right? Now imagine that exploding and being much more exponentially more pervasive through an online reality. I mean, to really have that khushu in prayer, like, I don't know. And then you can think about, interesting questions. Like, for example, can you have Jum'ah Salah in VR? Right, right? Is that even possible, right? So, or if you wanted to really take it to the next level, if you have a digital version of the Kaaba, and is that going to count as you praying in the Haram? So it's all. I think all these questions are emerging. Now, the one that really, I'd say, struck me the most when I started looking into this space quite a lot was when I saw an episode of Black Mirror. Have you guys seen Black Mirror? Right? You guys should know that it's a very dystopic series in the sense that it takes a piece of tech and then shows you the full implications of that, for the most part, on the negative turns, right? And there's this one episode, and I remember it still haunts me, and I use it even in my classroom with my students. And the episode goes as this. So these are two guys, so blokes, right? These are two guys. They're playing a game, and the game is completely immersive. So all you have to do is you stick a little gizmo to one of your, I think, what is it called, a lips notes, right?
BCR.
So oh yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Mashallah. So you stick it here, and it's like you're fully immersed, right? You're fully immersed. And so these two guys, they're both married, right? They're playing. Now, they're playing the equivalent of, for those of you who are from my generation, Street Fighter, right? Like Tekken, those things. So you pick an avatar and you fight one another. Now, one guy chose the avatar of a girl, the other one chose the avatar of a guy. Now, what's interesting is, in this world, if you get hit, you feel it. Like you are now physiologically, if you're not gonna get bruise marks on your skin, but you have a physiological expression of sorts. Okay? Now, after they fought, what ended up happening, and this is where it gets really weird, is they became intimate. Now the question is this counted as zina or not? There is no such thing as, real physical penetration or whatever, but it's physiologically felt. So what's the boundaries here? Is that counted as zina or not?
I was just saying, when you come back to the real world, then now you
Yeah.
start questioning your reality, right? So
Yeah.
am I oriented in a different way? Do I have different feelings? What did I choose the wrong life, right? So I do
Yeah.
remember that was one of the episodes that stuck with me, and it disturbed me for a long time. And that's where I got into the series just to see what's going on. And in fact, a few of our topics are based off of that as well. So yeah, I mean, very valid point.
Yeah. So like, I'm a father of an 8-year-old. In 10 years, he'll be 18. And then teenager mode, that's when hormones start kicking up, right? So now if you have technology like this, right? How are you going to pull back on hormones like that? So I get very worried. I naturally get worried. As Muslims, we should be incredibly worried. Like this kind of tech is very, very dangerous. Now that's one concern. Now the problem is you are forced to adopt this tech. None of us had the choice to say no to the mobile phone. None of us, right? All of us had to adapt. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to survive in the job market today. That's true for all of us, right? Now, if you start making this the norm, like Yusuf, you must know this. Recently, what did Google introduce where you can now wear glasses and it feels like you're Google
Yeah.
Beam, I think, or something like that. Yeah. And so these are glasses where it's now so real, it's as if the person is now in front of you, even though it's just a fictitious reality. Now, how that's going to, I think, play out in the future, I only go to the negative thought because that's the part that I'm worried about. And I have a feeling that ulama need to do a lot of work now in being able to deliver certain guidelines to be able to engage with these topics, right? I think that is where I think fuqaha are going to be seriously challenged. Seriously challenged. Like when I saw that episode of these two guys being intimate, the first question that in my mind was, do we need to redefine what zina is now? Because the fiqh definition is very specific, right? Does this count? Does this now provide us with enough thrust, right, to be able to redefine the definition, yeah or nay? I don't know, right? So these are some of the, I'd say, theological quandaries that are emerging out of this. And I'll be the first one to say I don't know the answers. This is not something that I have clear answers for. But I think that, you know, our ulama, our senior scholars need to take this very, very seriously. Because my feeling is, and I'm saying this looking into the academy sphere, right? Things are changing super fast, like incredibly, incredibly fast. And the jobs landscape, it's going to be completely redefined, I'd say, in the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, just a couple of days ago, Yusuf, you might know better. What is it that Microsoft, they laid off like 7,000 employees? Is that
Right.
correct?
Yeah.
There you go, right? And that's one of the main like players of the field. Now you think that that's not going to trickle down to the other spheres? It's going to completely trickle down, right? So think of schools making this mandatory. And if you say no, sorry, I don't want VR, your kid is going to fall behind. So what do we do now? Do we immerse our? So we have to get into this. The question is now, how do we make this manageable, right? This is a question that the awam need to face. So this is where I think it's not just a scholarly duty. One of the things I tell a lot of my students is, look, not all of us are meant to be Shaykh al-Islam. Not all of us are meant to be Ghazali, right? Some of us need to be the wealthy people, or the ones who control the shots, or where are the tech names, where are the Muslim financiers. Yeah. Those guys need to make their space up here, right? Where is the Muslim version of Elon Musk? Right? Where are those guys? Because if you want to control the narrative, at least be on the table to be able to control the narrative. Right. And I think that's one of the things that we fail to see, right? Is that we need to be able to have strong Muslim voices in all of these fields. And at the moment, I think we're still in that lag phase. And if I think we're not collectively working strongly and smartly enough, I think we will be worked upon rather than doing the work. Right. That's my thought. Yeah, Yusuf, would you agree with that?
Absolutely. We'll end up becoming mere consumers of all this, right? We'll be falling behind. If you go to these national conventions, Muslim conventions, right? And you go to the bazaar, and if there are 100 stalls, 50 of them will be on clothing, 30 will be food stalls, the rest will be Islamic calligraphy, and there'll be 1 or 2 tech stalls, and they will sell, your adhan alarm clocks, right? Or something like that. And but the change is happening. I think there are a lot of, so we are senior professionals in the tech industry at different spheres. We may not have decision-making authorities, but we are getting there. I think what needs to happen is getting more independent investments in this and some R&D focus to kind of test this out, right? Create our own models. I think there was some positive news recently with the investments in Saudi with the whole AI. So that's something to start with. Again, political discussions aside, where that would leave us, that's different. But yes, there is some traction happening, but it's quite slow compared to how the industry is progressing.
Dr. Shoaib, so I did have just a little follow-up question. Based on your experience and dealing with, because you've presented different topics so like ulama, and obviously you deal with an international student body. From your perspective, how would you categorize the Muslim world right now? Are they very resistant? Are they naively optimistic? Or are they just somewhere in the middle? Do you think that, like, if you bring up this topic in the khutbah, you're either going to get laughed at or attacked? That actually happened to me. I did a khutbah on AI at my local masjid. I got attacked literally right after. Like, someone came up to me yelling at me, right? So where is the Muslim world right now? Are we just speaking in an echo chamber, or do you really think that ulama, especially ulama, are waking up to this reality?
I think before we get to how people are reacting to this, we do have to be a little bit sensitive to why where we are because of historical circumstances. We have to stress, and I keep stressing this point, we are in a post-colonial environment and in a post-caliphate environment. Okay? This is very, very important to start this conversation. What is that? Why is that important? Is because the Muslim world did not start off on the same footing as the West in the past at least 150 years. We started from ground zero, right? Nation state development started happening after the caliphate dropped. And because of that, a lot of infrastructure, energy, all of those schooling systems, education had to be built ground up. Yeah. So I think when you're starting from at that point, while the West is already advancing, we are playing a catch-up game. Because of that catch-up game, right? A result of that, as well as prior to that, there has been a bit of a rift between madrasa students and university students, right? That's why if you speak to a university student, they will be the, mashallah, amazing engineer, a doctor, or whatever, financier. But when you ask him about Quran Hadith, their knowledge is almost tanked down. And the opposite is true from the madrasa side, right? So there is a bridging problem that we're having here. There is a bridge problem. This is not to say it's across the board, but it's definitely visible on a large scale. When we think about new topics, the reaction to all of this first starts off with, these are new things, these are Western ideas, these are modern ideas. We don't need to worry about this. This is something that we just need to neglect, right? That, I think, is a very problematic outlook. And the reason for that is because if we don't engage with this, it's going to be thrusted upon us in a way that will be completely radicalized and completely alien to the way we see the world and the way we want to shape the world. So I think that narrative is severely problematic. So you do have, I would say, a huge number of circles who are genuinely very unconcerned, nonchalant, or just like don't want to bother with any of these conversations. You have those spaces, and not just like a few minority. You've got a sizable amount, right? So I think that's one side of the spectrum. And the other side of the spectrum is, bale, let's do everything we want, right? Let's just go straight into it, right? We should really just accept everything in AI and all of that, right? And I think that's also problematic. I think that we need to be able to filter these both at a metaphysical lens as well as a jurisprudential lens, because not everything works according to our system. And I think there's a dilution of what the Islamic worldview is, right? So you have a secularized or a colonized mindset. Between these extremes, you have a variety of reactions. But I think my first kind of response that I get from students around the world and some ulama around the world is skepticism, right? Are these technologies really going to do anything, And so when ChatGPT first came out, and I said to some ulama in the group, just watch. In a few years' time, this will be now a concern for i'jaz al-Quran. Just watch, right? So the i'jaz, the whole idea of the Quran is inimitable, right? It's eloquence and yada yada, etc. Right? Now, if you feed AI enough of the Arabic corpus, would it match it? Yes or no? That's a concern now. That's a very significant concern that we need an answer for, right? So that whole debate about what is the i'jaz of the Quran is going to be reignited, and if we don't take that seriously, that can be a huge point of doubt for some of our students, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is, I feel that there's a lack of, I would say, understanding of what AI can do. So when you say AI, they just think it's like a fancy calculator. That's one of the first buzzwords that you see when you first speak to people about AI. But then you show it Mid-Journey, then you show it ChatGPT, then you show what just came out yesterday or a few days ago, Veo, right? Veo 3, Yusuf, was that it? Yeah, by Google, Veo 3, right? My God, it can now produce Hollywood movies just with a few prompts, right? That, and remember, ChatGPT came out, late 2022, early 2023? This is just 2.5 years of advances, 2.5 years. And if you see the amount of progress, if you want to call it that, where we are able to now do so many things, which we first outsourced to experts who have now run out of jobs because of AI. That is just going to get exponentially crazier in the next 5 to 10 years. And I don't think the Muslim world is ready for that. I don't think they really understand the implications. And so when I teach at Al-Balagh, my own academy, and various other institutes, be it universities or colleges or madrasas, one of the first things I'm trying to get them to understand is this is a serious thing you need to keep an eye on, right? Don't just be stuck in the books. It's great that you're in the books, mashallah, excellent. Do your fiqh, do your hadith, do your Arabic, excellent. Bale. But we need to have an eye here, right? If you don't have an eye that is shaping the way contemporary Muslims are going to be shaped by these developments, my overall approximation of the Muslim world is a lot of skepticism and lack of acknowledgement. That's a general. There are some circles who are switched on, very, very switched on, right? For example, people in Darul Qasim, they've got a really good brother, Maulana Wais. He's in the AI space. I think he has, mashallah, very good ideas in terms of how he thinks about this. He's doing good work there. We have a few people that are on the skeptical side, which I'm a little bit worried about because I think that doesn't do enough to be able to engage or even, rethink some of our assumptions. Like one of the things that I'm dealing with right now is, can AI ever reach the point of having sentience or agency? Right? Like that's a very, very important question. And usually it's, what do you talk about agency? This is a machine. What do you think is going to happen? 150 years ago, we never thought we were able to make it to the moon. 150 years ago, no one thought when you press something and a big screen will turn on, people would think you're doing the jinn, you're contacting the jinn. Our assumptions of what we can and cannot do change. For all we know, Allah could have created a world where if you fuse certain tech together and if it gets to a point, there might be a threshold where it actually becomes an agent. Right? That's not in the realm of impossibility.
It's insane. Some of again, with all due love, respect, and admiration, there are big names in the US, big name Muslim scholars or leaders, right, who deny the moon landing altogether, who deny that we sent a man to the moon. And they openly say this, openly create podcasts, openly, and it's just you don't know whether to hit your head against the wall or laugh. You really don't know.
But you see, Naveed, you've hit the point on the head, right? Is that what we are these inter debates that we're having, whether we went to the moon or not, etc. This is where that rift comes in, right? So you have people who are in the madrasas and they are dubious of anything modern. And that happens. That is very, very possible. And then you have people in the university who are excellent with, maybe, so-called modern knowledge, but then just don't know how to engage with tradition. There's a disconnect. There is a real disconnect. Dr. Asim Padilla, he has a very good term. He calls it bridge builders. We need bridge builders, right? So we need people. You cannot master all the sciences. You cannot master all the Islamic science. It's impossible, right? The knowledge is now way more than what it was like, more than 1,000 years ago, right? So what we need are people who can engage on specific contact points, right? So what is the fiqh of AI? That's one question. What is the kalam of AI? That's another question, right? Organ transplantation. I have one guy here, mashallah, Dr. Mansoor Ali. He is one of those rare breeds who has his footing in the alamiya, space as well as in the university space. The guy is a gem. He is working on a very good book right now on organ transplantation. Can we give our organs? Can we take our organs? Is it only for Muslims? Can we take from non-Muslims? Those are controversial questions. And here's a big one. What about animals? Right? And can we take stuff from swine and pig? Right? Even can we do that? Yes or no? Right? So, and he's engaging in those. For me, one of the most, I would say, concerning questions, really concerning questions, is ectogenesis. And this has not been given enough oxygen, in my opinion. Ectogenesis are artificial wombs, right? Artificial wombs. That is not science fiction. That is science reality. That's here, right? So, and now imagine both of you are clued up about corporate space. Who will be the number one lobby that would want to push this out? That, this is something that should be normalized. It'd be the corporations. Why? Because you're going to save money on maternity leave, which is a big cost. Now, if you normalize that, and women then, again, they have to face that, glass ceiling effect. You either sign the contract saying, oh yeah, I'll sign up the job, but then you have to take this. So if you get pregnant, you can only get pregnant by ectogenesis, not naturally. Right? Now the question is, okay, what happens to womanhood? Right? Ask women, are you comfortable with that option? Right? So there are so many questions that are coming out in this new era that we're being ushered in, and I don't know the answers for these. I'm trying my best, like you guys, to bring attention to them, but I have a feeling that a lot of marketing work needs to be done. I think a lot of intimate conversations need to be had, very transparent conversations. Even if we are disagreeing, okay, disagree, but at least let's start having those, regardless of where we stand. I think that's the starting point. Have the ability to talk with one another.
Absolutely. hearing all this, like I'm doing a khutbah in about an hour, actually about 2 hours, and I kind of want to change my topic now. But at the same time, I have to be so mindful to, not get backlash, because again, like you said, Dr. Shay, we have to really ease people into this stuff. It's like a very hard to swallow pill for a lot of Muslims, and until they're eased into it, you have to think twice even before you get up on minbar and start telling people facts and realities, SubhanAllah. But before we go to the next topic, so Yusuf, I did want to ask you, right? So you mentioned the tech aspect of parallel realities and multiverses, right? But can you expand a little bit more on how advanced is this going to go? Like how deep is this going to get? Like are we going to have chips really implanted into our brains? Like how crazy do you see this from a technical aspect going?
Let me ask Yusuf, just to add on to what Naveed is saying. I genuinely want to know what you think about Neuralink in your response. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think we have another topic for Neuralink. So I think let's wait for that topic to come up. But I'll quickly comment on the parallel reality first, right? So we touched upon simulated reality, and that's obviously there. It's here. We are using it on a daily basis. When it comes to parallel reality or multiverses, now this all became famous with the whole Marvel series and the whole idea of multiverses, right? Kids are fascinated about it and so on. But now it's catching up into mainstream ideas because people think that there is a parallel version out there, and the whole thing about now this is less technical, more scientific, right? I'm not a scientist, so I'm not the right person to comment on this. But the whole idea of multiverses, right? It's partially philosophical and partially it has some roots in metaphysics. Now, when it comes to philosophical, right from the ancient philosophers, they speculated that there could be other universes. There are reference to that in the Quran as well in terms of universes, and how do we interpret it? That's a different question. Having those universes exist in different spheres, but do humans exist in different realities, or is there a parallel version of me who's not a techie, who's probably a farmer? Those things are questionable, right? There are no roots to that. They are just theories, and I think, and Dr. Shoaib might know better about this, is some of this came up to challenge the whole idea of kalam or creation, right? Or causality, where the basis of kalam is everything is created, and but this challenges that, because if one universe can exist and they are saying this is by accident, there could be other universes that can exist by accident, right? So what's the science behind this? I think there are various angles to this. There's a many world interpretation concept. There's an inflationary cosmology, string theory, and all those, right? Although I was fascinated with physics growing up, I took that as my undergrad subject, and then I failed so badly, I dropped and switched to computer science. So I'm no longer, into those things. But yes, those are theories only. There's no proof as yet on life on other universes, or there's no direct correlation. So mostly theories. I think movies are glamorizing this even more. But we'd be happy to take a comment from Dr. Shoaib on the Kalam side of things.
So, we're talking about multiverses in the sense of origins, right? Cosmological
Yes.
origins.
Right.
So, there's an interesting debate that took place between Avicenna and Ghazali, right? And this is really manifested in the work Incoherence of the Philosophers, which I assume many of the viewers will know about. If not, it's a really good text to actually get an insight into how some of the philosophical debates of the day were taking place in medieval Islam. And this debate actually is not a debate between two individuals, it's between two rival philosophies, right? So when we say Islamic philosophy, it doesn't really mean what people think today, which is like, oh, you're studying logic and metaphysics, all that. No, no, no. In history, historically speaking, Islamic philosophy meant certain ideas of Plato and Aristotle that were adopted and put in an Islamic web by Al-Kindi, Farabi, Ibn Sina. That's what we mean by Islamic philosophy historically. And one of the things that they espoused was that the universe or creation was eternal, right? There was no T0, so to speak. Whereas the Kalam scholars, right? So this is where Ghazali kicks in. They believe that there was a T0. Now, this is becoming an interesting contention in light of modern science. Modern science, at least according to a good number of physicists, they will say that there is a T0, Big Bang, namely. Now there are other options that are being devised, right? Things called the multiverses, where there, in addition to our universe, which has one Big Bang, and we're now at what 14.6 billion years later, but there have been other Big Bangs. You know, they may be separated from us ontologically, or they may be connected us. We don't know, right? But now, if there are other universes, then one question emerges. Then how do you deal with that, right? How does that work into these classical debates? If there could be other universes, or if we could be in an oscillating universe. So that's another model, right? That we are in a series of big bangs and crunches and big bangs, and this can go on and on and on and on. How does that revitalize the conversation? And it's here where you will find a lot of good work that are being done by fellow academics who are trying to rethink or reinvigorate some of these classical conversations and breathe new life into them, right? So people like Sheikh Hamza Karamali, he's one of the most switched on Kalam scholars, 100% today. You've got Ramon Harvey, you've got David Solomon Jalajil, you've got people at Zaytuna who are talking about this, people at Darul Qasim talking about this, and on and on and on, mashallah, right? Abdurrahman Merrick, for example, right? So these guys, they're very rooted in the tradition, and they're also now beginning to see how to maybe engage with some of these conversations. And I think also, because there's now a re-familiarization with Kalam into more of its details, not superficially, but into its details, I think people are finding resources that they can pick up on and I'd say, not interpret, but represent within a modern context. And I think that's the stuff that is happening today. So without getting too technical, there are two levels of arguments for God's existence, two very popular ones. One is called Dalil Huduth, right? Which argues that there was a T0 of sorts. And then there's something called Dalil Imkan, which is the idea of contingency, right? Now, there was beef amongst the scholars on which argument was stronger, right? And this debate is now re-emerging because of these scientific advances that have kicked up. And at least to my opinion, the one that does emerge to be more, I think, on the stronger side of things is Dalil Imkan. The why and how is not the purpose of this today, but I just wanted to spray that out there so people can look into this, in the optics online or whatever. But that's how some of these questions are being re-expressed.
It's all fascinating stuff. Just for the sake of time, we are going to move on to the next topic. Dr. Shoaib mentioned really briefly about, this kind of virtual reality companionship, right? So now I want to talk about the tech perspective AI companions. So, robots, humanoids, whatever we want to call them, right? We see this a lot in movies, Terminator. See, I'm not that boring. I at least know the Terminator. This is no longer science fiction, right? It's actually very real. We have humanoids in various advanced stages of development and testing, literally as I speak right now to you, right? So we know the tech is real. It does exist. So I wanted to first, throw this to Yusuf. Can you comment on some of the tech aspects? What's the current state of this technology, and what do you see the future holding?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a common misconception is that AI just launched 2 years back, right? AI has been there for quite a while. In fact, I was lucky to be in the industry. We created the first bots digitally about, I think, back in 2015. Obviously, they were in early stages, and there were limited use cases on how we deployed this. These were mostly for websites, and customers or users who would come to the website would get easy access to the content, answers questions, FAQs, and stuff like that, right? So that's been there, and then that's evolved into more conversations versus Q&A, right? So earlier these bots were one question, one answer. Now it's conversational, it's continuous. Even some of the free versions of ChatGPT, it can remember your previous conversations and then tweak the responses accordingly. You don't even have to give the context. So yes, they have been evolving rapidly. You have the NLP models. Think of ChatGPT, Google Gemini. You have voice cloning now with 11 Labs and OpenAI's voice, and now with the recent launches by Google. You have facial animation using Synthesia, NVIDIA, right? You can create those. You can create videos from prompts now. It becomes so easy. And you have embodied AI. I think that's where we are heading to now, humanoid, right? So you take all these inputs, and now your robots, which are typically doing basic tasks, now you have robots who can be a chef. There are robots who can do complex work, handle heavy machinery, industries, and so on. So those use cases are evolving pretty good, pretty fast. Now the question is, what are some of the positive use cases of this, right? So there are various industries where this is applied very effectively. For example, in mental health, you have apps like Wobot or Visa, I think, where you can do therapy with a virtual psychiatrist, right? You can have a free-flowing conversations and get recommendations and so on. So that's one use case. You have robots in elderly care, which is very fascinating, because now if someone can have an assisted robot, and I think in Japan they're testing this out, where they remind seniors to take their meds on time, keep them company, prevent them from some physical harm. That's an excellent use case as well. In education, I think we have seen this a lot, where it all started with, and we all in the education space, so I think we would know, where we use ChatGPT for writing prompts or writing papers. But now it's come beyond that, where you have AI tutors that can adapt to your learning needs. And that's a very good use case as well, because now your kid can, instead of going to a tutor, they can have learning paths and everything created right then and there, with easy access and very, very custom recommendations. In fact, some would argue that this is even better than some of the non-qualified teachers. So that's one aspect. Special needs, kids with autism, building social skills. So you can have bots who can train kids on that. Customer service, this is where I started about 5-7 years back. Hotel bookings, flight bookings, or other industries like retail and e-commerce. And think of Amazon, think of Walmart. You can have these virtual bots who can answer all your queries. You don't even need to talk to a customer service agent and wait on the phone for hours. And you can replace your orders, you can ask for refunds, and so on. Everything can be done within a span of minutes. So all these are real. There's heavy evolution happening in this space. There's millions of dollars of cost saving for companies in doing this, and obviously this is something that's evolving, right? Now, in talking about the risk, obviously there are darker sides to it as well, and that's where the humanoid conversation came up when Naveed and I were talking about this. Is now, let's say, for example, you have human bots. Now, with the advancements of technology, and I think we have seen videos of this online, yet to see how real is this. Now you can have synthetic materials on a bot which will feel like humans to a certain extent. You ingest AI on it so it can have emotional conversations with you. Just imagine this being hypersexualized by the industry, where you now have female companions, female bots, right? Now, obviously, that's a whole Pandora's box by itself. Now, whether you have a bot for as a help, so that raises the question on, does it have rights like maids or slaves? And then if you have bots at home, how do we treat them? And then think of female bots, and what does Islam say about gender interaction if it's a female bot? But then you are free to do whatever you want with it, right? Because you're owning that bot. Now, kids growing in this environment, having virtual friends like bots, that can have real emotional impact. So these are all dark things that we are seeing this happening. I think there's no effort to kind of address this. I think there's some discussions happening, but that's where we thought this platform can at least ask some of these questions, so that we can start thinking on those lines. And Navid, I'll pass it back to you for any follow-up questions for Dr. Shoaib.
For sure. I mean, this all sounds scary. I kind of want to just turn off and go to sleep right now. Um, so Dr. Shoaib, I mean, with everything that Yusuf just mentioned, Islamically, ethically, how do we fit everything into this? I mean, if tomorrow, like my son asks me to buy him a bot, I don't know. I mean, what are you gonna do with it and all this stuff? I mean, just some comments from your end, what's the Islamic ethical aspect of all this?
So I like to start off by saying that if they make a robot that can make burgers, I'll be the first one in the queue to get. I think that's halal. But I think that what's going to happen is once these get scaled up and then commercialized, I think you're going to see what we do every time. So when ChatGPT came out, we have no Islamic versions of those. When these robots will come out, we're going to have Islamic robots of those, right? And I think that unless we have a strong set of conversation partners that can dictate the narrative, it'll always be, pun intended, the imitation game from our side. We're just going to imitate, we're just going to copy, we're just going to do and Islamize it in however we can do it to make it safe, right? So if there are, for example, robots that are, house companions, right? That can help around the house, but they can be sexualized. So that's programmed into them, right? There's a really good series with BBC called Humans. I recommend everyone watch it. It's really, really good. Um, what we will do is we will make something like that. I can easily see one Muslim entrepreneur saying, "Let me do that, but let me remove the negative elements so that it can never be sexualized." Oh, that's very plausible in my mind, right? So whether you want to buy that or not now, whether you think it's artificial or not, again, I think that on the one hand, we will always have these ethical deliberations, the do and don't, right? Is this haram? Is this halal? So, for example, right, one of the things that you have to think about, and this is something that they show in that series, Humans, is the burden on the wife, right? So, if you now have a super robot that is able to take care of the kids better than the mom, that can never get tired, right? That can never scream at the children, right? How will that make the mother feel as an authority in the house? How will that make her feel as a mom of the house? How will that make her feel as as the wife of someone, right? What kind of feelings? Because we tend to undermine the psychological component. Those social dynamics play a big role in a healthy family, right? So one of the scenes I remember in that movie was the young one of the kids goes up and says, "Mommy, can I please play?" And the mommy says, "Yeah, I'll come play." Like, no, 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 I don't want you to play with me. I want her to play with me. I'm a robot
Right.
because she never gets tired, whereas you do, and that made the mom feel distraught, right? So, and then, now here's the question: if that does become normalized, then what I can see is that you will see two extreme reactions. You either say, "I don't want robots in the house." I can see some partners saying that, or what you see is, "Okay, I've got nothing to do at home. I'll go out and work." Then there's a further divorcement from parents and children. And I'm not saying this will happen. I'm saying these are possibilities. These are in the realm of, possibilities that we can imagine for the future. And those are our ways of testing these ideas, right?
Right.
So, yeah, go ahead. Do you want to say something?
That reminds me of a episode I watched on Black Mirror where there's a lady who loses her husband, and then someone from a digital afterlife company reaches out to her and says, "We can create an avatar of your husband, and you can start talking to it virtually." So she does that, and she starts chatting, and it's talking exactly like her. But before that, she had to feed in information about the photos and previous conversations and so on. So this is extremely personalized, and the bot is talking to her just like her husband would talk. He's funny and so on and so forth. She gets interested. Now they send her a humanoid, which is now pre-programmed into her husband's image in terms of it looks like a husband because it has synthetic materials and everything. And now she can talk to him just like she would talk to her husband. The positive side of that is he's listening to everything that she's saying, right? Now he's doing household work and he's not arguing and he's doing this and that, and they have physical relationships as well. That's another thing. But then at some point, uh, he's just agreeing to everything. And she gets frustrated in the end. She's saying, "Why you're not fighting with me? Why you're not being human? Why you're not being my husband, right? Because you're not my husband. You're just agreeing to, that's not what a relationship is." And she gets pissed off, and then it really becomes dark towards the end. And that's what it is. I mean, those things that make us real, that makes us humans, we lose some of those things. And I was joking with my wife. I said, "Hey, see, this is what is going to happen. So, it's better for us to argue than to be in a situation where yeah, that's funny, but yeah, I think it's real, and especially with the children, right? If they have access to these Mikos and whatnot, they are innocent bots right now, which they just help them around, joke them around, but then children getting addicted to it, and they just keep spend hours and hours talking and not engaging with other humans. I think that's a real risk.
I've heard AIs can take your job, but AIs can take your wife. Where does this end?
You see me. It's not your wife. It can also take your husband. It works both ways. But I wanted to add that I think one conversation that will blow up, this is my prediction, I may be completely wrong, is that the whole discussion of concubines is going to reemerge in a new. That's my personal guess, but I have a very strong suspicion that that is going to take on new forms in this the ability of having robots and if they can become sexual partners or not. I suspect this is going.
SubhanAllah, I remember like I was studying in a very traditional setting, just very classical Hanbali manual al-fiqh with the Sheikh, and he purposely skipped over the chapter slavery because he said it's just not relevant to our times. And now it's like we have to kind of revisit everything. And, like you mentioned, certain chapters that right now we look at it as like completely irrelevant might just come up again. But now, Dr. Shoaib, I did have a question for you. And this goes back to what Yusuf mentioned. Sometimes we do find robots in the industry, and I'm sure this is going to get more and more common, which literally almost have flesh on them, right? And they're created to basically just be a human being, right? Essentially, and so on and so forth. And you can take this and run with it, literally, right? Like it never ends. But now, from an ethical perspective, right? Does this not challenge or astaghfirullah even rebuke or answer Allah's question to us that you can't even make a fly? Like Allah's the creator, right? So where's the lines now? Like, didn't we just create something?
Yeah, so I think that on a theological level, you're not you're not competing with the God with God in the sense that you've made something from absolutely nothing. Only God is the one that can do that, right?
Right.
So God is the one who can create literally ex nihilo from absolute nothing. What we're doing is we're configuring existing things in a way that can be very fortunate for us, right? That can be very conducive for us, or at least that's what we think they're conducive for us. So I don't think that those challenges will emerge. I will, however, I can foresee the possibility that some people will think like that. That what we're doing here, it's no better than the idols that were propped up 1400 years ago, right? We are creating idols, very technical idols in our image, right? And that can I mean, you guys even haven't touched the more interesting discussion points. Like we're in the safe quarters right now. You have to think about how these AIs can become prophets, right? Imagine if some of these AIs go rogue. Imagine if you have muftis, right? This is my concern a lot. That what will happen to the scholarly community if you have AIs that are really super powerful? They have absorbed all knowledge possible, right? Not just on the digital, but they're able to scan manuscripts and whatever have you, right? No fusha like that, which it already does, by the way. It already does no fusha very well, right? Now, what do? If it can dish out fatwas, right? From every single method, even challenge existing opinions, now what? From a social level, I can see a generation or pockets of communities that can say, why will I trust you? You're a human being. You just study what, 7, 15 years? This thing is more powerful than you. It knows more than you. I trust it more than you. Like there's going to be a change in the socialization of things, right? Of how we even understand authority, how we understand even chains of transmission, right? And just like we see with book publishers, oh, those are not good publishers, those are very strong book publishers, we're going to see the rise of techno methods. I call them techno methods or muftis, right?
Right.
So you have a techno method that's backed up by Al Azhar. I think people will trust that, right? Don't think this is going to be a neutral enterprise. Islamophobes are going to invest in their own methods, right? That will seed in their own values that they want to do to, destroy Islam, right? And so I think that this whole world can blow up into something very very strange, and that hadith that the end of time will be super strange. Like the isharat are it feels like that a lot more now. It feels very normal to be in strange times, and that's what I see. I see all those possibilities playing out that you will be able to, because one of the articles that articles keep coming out on AI and philosophy and theology. And one of the things that I read the other day was, if these AIs start prophesizing and they're prophets, and if they have immense amounts of power or knowledge behind them, and they can predict things very carefully, that's almost Dajjalic in the sense that it can have a certain sense of powers that that are very close to that. So you can play around a lot with these ideas, a lot. And so where I think this is all going to go, again, I think there are three fronts that need to be tackled. Number one, we need to have a strong educational front, traditionally as well as acknowledging the contemporary spaces. Missing either of those two, incomplete solution. That's the first thing. Number two, we need to be super proactive in the fintech industry, right? I definitely, like, some of my students are in fintech, right? And they constantly, when we study, they say like, oh, I wish I can study these texts, day in, day out. I'm like, Baba, you are exactly where you're supposed to be. Be the best fintech person you can be possible, right? That's where you are, and that is your service to Islam. Trust me. Then we need the R&D side that needs to be developed. And this is not just the Islamic side, but also the tech side. And these two need to be in very close intimacy with one another, right? They need to be able to converse and be able to exchange thoughts very, very carefully. If we have the research side and the tech side that's being developed, but it doesn't have the Islamic concerns, it's just going to go away. Like initially, the first ChatGPT, I don't know if you guys remember, the first ChatGPT, I asked it, please do tahrif of the Quran. It did it in 1 second. It doesn't do it now because of the sensitivity now. It doesn't do it now. But the first one it did. I remember I asked it, please do tahrif of this hadith. Boom. I even showed it to a book publisher. I'm not going to name who, but I showed it to a book publisher. I was like, look, let's choose any hadith. He chose Muwatta. I chose, okay, then he gave me a particular hadith. He said, okay, do tahrif of this, make it so subtle that it's not detectable. And we saw it do it.
Right.
Right? So, right? So we need to have very strong R&D, both on the tech side as well as on the theological side. And these need to be in touch. And now I remember what I was supposed to say earlier on in that first part, which is, mashallah, I remember when I was invited by Google to speak regarding all of this, right? And Google has like internal not circles, like the Islamic circles and religious voices, basically. And the brothers and sisters there, despite the constraints that they have, are trying their very best to make sure Islamic sensitivities are within these developments of Google. Regardless of what you say about Google in terms of what they're doing in their wider ecosystem, if they are not there, we have no oxygen left in that ecosystem. So we need people in all of these spaces. 100% they need to be there. There's a whole conversation of net cost balance. And I think that people lose the long-term goal and the long-term gain with short-term insights. I think that's the key problem. So those, I think, are the three things that we need to focus on. Education, definitely we need to work on that. We need to be able to have a way of socializing these very carefully, and we need to have R&D, 100%. These three, I think, are very, very important. I don't know, Yusuf, do you want to add that?
Just a question. How do you think we should handle this from an Islamic education perspective, where in all our Islamic seminaries and all, we are tackling traditional subjects, and then we leave all these topics to be taught by the traditional system, and the traditional system will have, obviously, it'll have their own positives and own negatives, but we ourselves are not creating courses on this or addressing this. And in our institute, for example, we may not have undergrad students. We may have students seeking high Islamic knowledge, but then there are these topics are kind of it's not synced in to answer your point. I think should there be a call to action in this space where we should proactively now start looking into this?
100%. So it's one of the reasons why I try so some of my students are ulama, and I say that in a very casual way, insofar that they are my teachers as more than I am, they're my students, in the sense that they are learning these things so they can go back in their circles to be able to teach these things. So for example, mashallah, I can't say who, but there are some ulama who are doing now courses on AI in Islam. And they said, how does this course look like? And mashallah, that's good. That's good. That's what you need, right? That's what you need. And some of these like very visibly discomforting conversations that we're having, that's not taking place in seminaries, right? But their attitude needs to be there. There are some circles that won't have that attitude, right? And it goes both ways, Yusuf. It's not just like we have to get the seminarians to talk about these things. 100%, I agree with that. We also have to get the guys at the university to be open-minded to talk to seminarians. Because sometimes you have a highbrow mentality with some of these guys here. They say, oh, these are old things. We're in a new world. We should forget about Ghazali. Let's just start from scratch, right? I think that attitude also needs to change. So I think, is there a point of call in terms of reinvigorating our education system? 100%. I think there are attempts in the way. TISA, for example, you guys were there. Mishka was there. How did I meet Naveed? Naveed, he was a student on Islam and Science, right? He was a student.
Mishka, yeah.
Right? So he was there, right? Balagh is doing something. Sheikh Hamza Karamali, through his Basira, mashallah, right? I have my own academy where I teach some of these things. So people are trying. It's not that people are not trying. But this is not an overnight solution. It's and this is something I say, it may seem crude, but it's necessary. It's easy to build a mosque. It's hard to train a scholar.
Right.
Easy to build a mosque, but it's hard to train a scholar. And I think people need to be able to put investment, resources, money in not just the flashy, masjids. It's that where are my scholars that are going to be the frontline defenses in the next 10, 20 years? That long-term vision we need to have, right? That long-term vision we need to have.
Dr. Shoaib, can you join the board of my masjid? Yeah.
So, and create more controversy, yeah, for you.
Literally. It's funny. I literally had to message some of my friends this morning asking if I could borrow a topi because just from the way my hair is, I'm gonna get backlash. Like that's how simple-minded, unfortunately, our Muslim community is. And they're like really successful professionals. That's the thing that blows my mind. Some of them are surgeons. You know what I mean? But when it comes to Islam and ethics, we just turn our brains off. I have no idea why. Yes, subhanAllah.
I think there are two things we need to appreciate when it comes to our elders. Number one, they build the mosques that we're benefiting from today. We should never forget that, right? Like they always izzat to them, right? There's no one can take that away from them. However, the members of the mosque, the board members of the mosque is a ubiquitous issue. I've seen it in the States, I've seen it in the UK, I've seen it a few other places. And unfortunately, this is now, I think, becoming almost toxic in the sense that we have a generation of people who are at the board that are not listening to what the new generation needs, right? I think there's a disconnect, right? And that disconnect is what I think is causing some of the turmoil. If we have, not necessarily forward thinking in the sense that some of these guys are outdated, in the sense that at least have the ability to take some of the concerns on very carefully and then act accordingly. The problem is we don't think like that. We think in a very, and it may be due to financial issues. That may be the case in some places. It may be due to because of sensitivity, concerns of shutting down, right? That's also a place now, particularly in your part of the world, the geopolitical situation is very sensitive. You've got to be very careful with each step you take, right? So you're constantly, you're constantly thinking about a lot of things, and maybe they have things that you cannot see. Maybe they have things that you cannot see. So I think it's very easy to play the blame game. I think it's very easy. If they cannot fix it, you fix it.
Right.
You create the opportunities to fix it, right? So, one of the reasons why I started my academy was because I wanted to create a customized set of courses that anyone can do in a modular way, whether you're mom, dad, parent, whatever, and flexible learning curves. Those are the kind of thing that we need to see more of. So if you are having difficulty in the masjid, no problem. You have WhatsApp, you have Telegram, you have social media. Make an announcement, do something with it. You could go to the masjid board. If there's your resistance, try something else.
Exactly. I remember a year back when I thought, we have a good, mashallah, big community in Dallas. So I approached a few masjids and said, let's do AI courses, right? And, from basic level of information on education to some of the advanced concepts as well, which will encourage people to start taking up AI as professions, as careers. We have not been able to organize a single session of all the people I approached, right? There could be timing issue, there could be some other issues, but then sheer willingness to put this on a priority agenda and do this. But then I think to your point is where some of us kind of take a step back is we look up to the traditional institutions to solve those problems. But now with this digital age, I think we should take steps to try and do something about it, right? I can simply sit and say, no one agreed for my session, no one kept it, so I'm fine, I did my part. But then there are other ways to do it. There could be 5 members on the audience or whatever, it doesn't matter, but do something about it. And collectively, more importantly, where we all come together and say, okay, I have this background, you have this background, let's join hands and focus on something which will be beneficial to everybody.
Yeah. Remember, guys, and this is I think many people don't really understand, and this is why understanding our history is super important. We don't have patronage anymore. That is gone, right? How did you get people like Ghazali, Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Sina? They had patrons behind them, right? We had dedicated people who would set up spaces for people, and their job was just to think, write books, think, etc., right? That system does not exist today. That system is gone. Okay, that is gone. So we are no longer living in Islamic polity, number one. We are no longer having dedicated patronage for endeavors like this. So where does the responsibility now on each of us? We do what is in our capacity. This is even a basic principle in Usul, right? You do what is in your capacity. So, mashallah, Yusuf, you're good in AI, you good over the tech, right? Then do something that can help, young kids in a way that understands, so that you're not necessarily training them for the next 5 years, you're necessarily for the next 20 years. Like, I can see this kid going there, right? Or if you wanted to engage with seminarians, okay, speak to some ulama who are on the same wavelength as you. They have their own frustrations with their own seminarians, right? Whatever you. So work together, start a new body, right? So I think that the response, everyone can sit and complain. Complain is not going to make progress. Complain is just acknowledging the issues. Working on them requires you going out there and doing things.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, inshallah, this Tech Talk series is one of those initiatives, inshallah, that we hope we can continue and, tackle these really important, relevant issues. So, in the interest of time, I didn't want to move on to perhaps our last topic for today. So Dr. Shoaib, you mentioned we're still scratching the surface. We're not even deep yet. So this might be our first step into like the deep stuff, which is the digital afterlife and mind uploading. So, what happens after we die? That's a fundamental question that really defines all religions, right? And obviously, we have our beliefs. In fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts the Quran in Surah Al-Baqarah by mentioning that the people who believe in the hereafter, who believe in the unseen, right? So death, right? Most people think tombstones, memories, old social media posts, pictures. But now, what if I tell you in the future, or maybe even now, right? You might live forever, right? As a digital version of yourself, uploading your consciousness to a computer and allowing it to live on after you die. So I'm going to divide this, right? The first is, the mind-bending world of the digital afterlife, right? And mind uploading. From talking to, lost loved ones through AI to one day uploading your consciousness, like I mentioned, into like a cloud somewhere that can be, distributed across the world, right? This is tech that's in real life now, right? This is no longer hypothetical theories. So I wanted to get into this first with Yusuf, right? How real is this? Like, can I really, is this happening right now where I can upload my mind somewhere, or is this something that's upcoming? From the tech aspect of this, how real is this, and should we be concerned, or is this really just something from the Matrix that, is fun to talk about?
I think a simplistic answer would be it's not real yet, but that'd be a very simplistic way of saying this, right? So let's unpack this. The first point that comes to mind is the neuroscience aspect of it, right? Now, I had to look this up because, again, this dwells more into science than tech. Now, if you map a human brain, there are like 86 billion neurons, trillions of connections in human brains, right? Now, until now, we haven't been able to map out fully a mouse brain, right? So that's where we are right now. That doesn't mean this mind upload or all that. It's a little bit still futuristic. But what exists today is some of the points that we have already discussed, which means you can train AI models and they can learn about your past life. So digital footprints, sharing of pictures, messages, voice notes, videos, right? So that can train AI models and speak exactly like your loved one who was passed away, right? There are some scary videos which are coming in where someone says, my mother had never met my child, so now I created a video on how it would look like for my mother to meet my child, and they created this digital version of that. And then obviously it may give some sense to the user. If I was the one doing this, I don't know what kind of pleasure it would give me. But then it doesn't really mean anything for the child because for him he's just seeing a video, whatnot, right? So that's one aspect which is real. And this is the foundation of digital afterlife, right? So at least from one aspect where you're recreating something which doesn't exist, and now you train it to have real-time conversations with you in a video format. It used to be in a chat format, but now it's very real. You can do that in a video format. You can talk to your deceased mother every single day. So now that's real, and that's the foundation, right? So that's one part of it. Now the whole mind upload thing, I think there are various complications to it. But then in terms of what's happening in the R&D space, I think there are companies like Hereafter AI, there are companies like Replica. They are developing AI companions in a way that just we described, that you can actually speak to them in real conversations. All that needs is a 10-minute video clip or something to everything to train the data, right? So again, all of this is real, the avatars and so on. There's no denying that it's already here, right? Now, when it still comes to a little bit futuristic, where you have now mind backups, so you can download everything onto a chip and then have a synthetic body and then upload it everything. There's a series called Upload. I think they have shown this extensively. And again, all of that is just theory right now, but that doesn't mean R&D is not happening in this space. It is happening, and there's various ways. Even in that series, they show that the upload of memory and then downloading that onto a virtual body in a virtual simulation, that was possible. What they couldn't replicate is now putting that back on a human body and then downloading the conscience there and then making it fully functional as a human. So at least they showed the limitations of what could be achieved. But then this entire thing of living virtual, like all your dead ones are there in a virtual world, talking to each other and so on, that's possible. You can create a simulated reality. You can create a virtual world just like your games of Fortnite and Roblox and whatnot, and then have all these dead folks there and living properly in this, right? Now, obviously, this poses questions, and I'll give it back to you on how this relates to Barzakh and how this relates to afterlife, and people start questioning our own concept that is everything a simulation then? Are we living in a simulation? Or what will happen in the hereafter? Is that a simulation, right? So those are some valid questions that keep coming up. But for now, to finish off on this, we are not uploading anything. That tech is not there. We're just scratching the surface in terms of the real aspect of the tech. But everything else, the foundation is there, and I think the groundwork is already there to evolve it to the next level.
Alhamdulillah. So all I have to worry about for now is robots, but this stuff is going to be later. So I'm going to hand this on to Dr. Shoaib. So Dr. Shoaib, I think the akhirah is like that one topic that really, I think, really differentiates us from our faith from every other faith, right? We really do believe in the day of judgment. We really do believe this world is literally quote unquote fake, right? Our real life is in inshallah in Jannah. That's where, our father comes from, and so on and so on. I'm not gonna get too deep into that. But now this crosses like right now, you kind of hope for or wait for maybe a dream where a loved one who passed away maybe visits you, right? But now if I can just upload their consciousness, hypothetically to a computer and just create a AI model, what about like the 3-day mourning period Islamically? What about everything now? Like everything is just like, oh my God, right? So I'd love to hear, your comments, reflections about this.
So I think one thing that you haven't paid attention to is forget uploading stuff, etc. We actually have active research on biological longevity, where we can now reverse the age of cells, right? So believe it or not, here at Edinburgh, one of our students that's going to start next year, I can't mention his name, but he's one of like the top guns scientists in this area, right? He's going to start doing research here on the theological impact it can have. So imagine that you can now biologically modify your cells, your cellular, functioning in such a way where you can live up to several hundred years, right? So we can induce that. It's not fully there yet, but definitely the concept is there. It's proven, right? So now you don't necessarily need to then wait for AI. You can just be very comfortable with your body right now, and you can live like this. And so I think the question is, what about that as a pre-conversation to all of this? Now, as for being able to upload stuff, personally speaking, I do see some very helpful things coming out of this. So I'll give you two personal examples, right? One, my mom and dad, they would have had a daughter who would have been my older sister, but she passed away when she was 6 months old, right? And it really traumatized my parents, right? And so that's why they were wishing that I was a girl. So I disappointed them, but so like apparently all family members were making dua that there's a healthy baby, alhamdulillah, everything is fine. But it turned out to be a boy. Now, could there be tech where we can upload? So her name was Sundus. That was my sister's name. So if we could upload pictures of Sundus and be able to give my mom some inkling of what it would have liked to see her again, I think she would have loved that, right? Right now, I pray for her that, because I told her, look, Sundus died when she was 6 months old. She's waiting for you on the gates of Jannah. She'll be extending her hands out to you, right? So definitely, I think that it's something that can be used very positively. 100%, I think it can be used very positively, right? I could even see that for with my own grandparents. So all my grandparents have passed away, right? And I saw my wife lose her mom. I was at her janazah. I cried like flip, right? So would I want to see her again? I know it's not possible, but could I have something like that where I can feel her kindness again in my life? It's a good thing to have. Now the question is, at what point do you reach a delusion? I think there's the space for it going wrong there, right? How real do you take this to be? But I've seen even people, like people in their late 90s or who are in their hundreds, right? So they have pictures of their spouses who've passed away, and you can take, like, I think, a picture, and the picture moves like it does in Harry Potter, and it's like, oh my God, I haven't seen my partner in so long like that, right? So I think those are good. Those, I think, are okay. As long now, what are the upper boundaries of that? If there are boundaries for these things, I don't know. I honestly, the questions are hard to answer.
The first question that immediately comes to mind is, how do you reconcile this with qadar, right? Someone has passed away, is Allah's qadar, we have to accept and move on. But now if we use all these digital alternatives, then now so it will have an emotional toll in one way or the other, because
Sure.
for the time being, you may have some kind of good feeling about it, that yes, your mother is back in your life, but then it'll take an emotional toll, because at some point you'll realize it's not real, right? Then how do we reconcile this with Allah's concept of qadar?
So this is where I think, for me, the best example is Abu Bakr. There's a reason why Allah chose him to be probably the best companion after the Prophet ﷺ. And he was probably the best. So when the Prophet ﷺ, you've got to bear in mind, right? It's very easy for us to say he's the best of creation. It's very easy for us to say that he's the best person to walk on. But to actually experience that is different. That is very, very different. Now, the ones who did experience it were the Sahaba. Yeah, just bear that in mind. He was the most beloved person in their lives. Like, you have to understand, he is literally like that, right? Now, when your most beloved person dies, it's hard to digest. Now, when we want to think of toughness, like, the man's man, who do we think of? We think of Umar Khattab. Now, what happened when the Prophet ﷺ died? Umar ibn Khattab lost it. Like, he couldn't process it. Like, don't say that he died. Like, I'll kill you. Like, he couldn't fathom it. He couldn't. But who stood up and who mustered up the understanding the Prophet ﷺ has passed away, right? It was Abu Bakr. And I think that's the example we should follow. 100% these people have passed away. This is my personal feeling, is that I don't think we'll be able to upload stuff, at least for now. That's my feeling, right? Because 100% we believe in an afterlife. We believe in the barzakh. We believe in all of these things, right? Those are 100% there, right? Could maybe these have new expressions? I don't know. I'm a little bit dubious about this exercise. But in terms of being able to use as therapeutic tools without necessarily giving them affirmation that these are real things for emotional support, right? Or just to have one more way of seeing this before you pass away. I don't think there's a real issue there. Where it becomes abusive is when you think these are real, I think, replications. That is where I think the danger can be. We end up deluding ourselves, and we have a habit of deluding ourselves, right? So I think that these are some of the things. I'm just saying that affectively, emotionally, these can be excellent therapeutic tools, really, and for some people, like some people may have, like, for example, think of a hypothetical, bro. Imagine you had a fight with someone and that person passes away. And the last memory you have of them is you fighting with them. Okay? Now that person passes away. Now imagine if, as a therapeutic tool, you have the ability to speak to a memory of them or some kind of upload of them, that replicates all their behaviors and all that. And you're able to just use that for closure. Now, of course, everything's with Allah. You're doing everything with Allah. But as a tool, for that person. Can it not be a good thing? Of course it can be a good thing for that person. Right?
But if it's left unrailed, and let's assume that, for example, again, I lost my mom in COVID and I took a hit, for quite some time now. Let's assume a situation where you have this model and you're talking to your mom on the screen. Now, if she's reinforcing positive things, saying that, yes, we'll be together in the hereafter and all that, right? It's still good. Now, what if this model is left uncontrolled and now she's saying negative things and saying, hey, what's the point of you living and things? If it goes in that really dark direction, people start taking their lives or start doing something stupid. Again, there is no control to this. So just like ChatGPT, I was having a property dispute with someone in my family recently. And to your point of techno shakes and all that. So everyone is using ChatGPT to come up with an interpretation. And you won't believe there were like 5 different verdicts given by ChatGPT on the same topic. And then eventually we came down to what was the prompt that he used to get it. And then, there was that discussion or debate around it. But then, yes, uncontrolled models, right? Who trains it, who controls it. And then if there's a hidden agenda to this, like more dystopian, and that will cause a lot of problems, I think.
100%. Remember, we should never lose our metaphysics. We believe that there is a God. We believe that he sent a prophet. That prophet came with scripture, and that scripture makes it very clear there is a hereafter. Those are very serious doctrinal commitments. No one can question any of those. And I don't think any Muslim should question those. It would be very severe to do so. But I would say that you don't need to go to these replicas or these models to test guardrails. The same problem applies to even mundane objects like a knife. You could use a knife to kill someone. You could use a knife for zabiha. The guardrails are what ethically you bring to the table. Our guardrails are the Sharia, 100%, right? So I think that's the key thing. If psychologists, and because they're the ones who will be able to deem this, if they feel that these can be psychologically helpful for people to get closure, for people to feel healthier, right? Now, not necessarily believing in those affirmations. Now, some people may fall into that. We don't know. That's why it's a case by case. You can't do generic rulings like that, right? It opens up a space for psychological betterment, right?
Right.
Like that's really the key thing. Like I can imagine. I'm not saying may Allah protect all our family members, but let's say if we have a family member and the last thing we said to them was "I hate you," or the last thing you said to them, something negative. Now you know that you directly speak to Allah saying, Allah, please forgive me for saying this to him, or please put mercy in their hearts in Jannah, etc., in the hereafter, etc., right? But now, if you have the ability to just have that psychological closure, not metaphysical, I can see psychologists making that argument. I can see them making that argument, right? So it's not an easy answer, is what I'm saying.
So, Dr. Shoaib, I mean, this sort of brings to mind there's one, it's pretty popular hadith, right, about like the Dajjal and how he can bring dead ones back to life. Now, obviously, you can be very literal about the hadith that Allah literally gave him the power to bring people back to life, like Isa alayhi salam, or we can kind of like say it, if you combine all the topics we just discussed today, right? So like robots plus this, if you can just maybe recreate somebody, right? Make AI robot, upload their consciousness to it and everything. Like, do you think this is sort of hinting to what the Prophet ﷺ was mentioning, or you think we should just take those as very literal? That no, when the Prophet ﷺ said he's going to be doing XYZ, he's going to do XYZ. This is not riddles and metaphors here.
Yeah, so generally the rule is to take things apparently until the context, the qarina, tells you otherwise, right? So I personally believe that these are going to be actual depictions, right? However, I have been in some circles where we have seriously thought about whether this could actually be an event within a simulation, right? So we're all plugged into like Ready Player One, for example, right? And so he splits you and puts you together, for instance, right? Whether that's plausible or not, what are the pros and cons of this? Not to say that this is a possibility, but saying like, if it's true, what would be the problems with this hermeneutically? What would be can you accept it? So just looking at it hermeneutically, just testing it, right? So I've seen those exercises being done in some circles. I've been in those conversations. I'm not too convinced that this is to do with AI, but can there be room for stuff like that? I think so. I think there are things that are in the hadith that are at least towards the end of time. Some of the hadith raise interesting discussion points. Like, for example, Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, he constantly refers to the hadith about the Prophet said that, there'd be music or you'd be hearing voices over your head, and that's like the headphones, or your thigh will speak. That's your phone, right? So they now have very clear, visible expressions to what maybe they were just guessing about. So could we have something like that with this? Maybe. Wallahu alam. Wallahu.
I mean the topic, and I mean we're not gonna go into this topic because this would require a whole different podcast. But the whole issue of AI and then these end of times hadith that we have, right? Many of which do obviously, I mean, every student of hadith knows this, have a lot of weaknesses in them, right? But they're still there. There's no doubt they're still there, and there are some that are found in more authentic collections like Bukhari and Muslim and so on, right? But this whole concept of AI and Dajjal, like you mentioned, Dr. Shoaib, I think, most ulama would say, uh, you take it literally unless the context tells you otherwise, right? But it's like you see so many just similarities, right? Even like controlling the weather, causing an earthquake, bringing dead back to life, right? Claiming to be God. One question the AI khutbah I gave a while back where I was, some people didn't like it, right? I literally posed this question to the audience, right? I said, as Muslims, at least speaking in the American context, right? I think we downplay people's intelligence a lot, right? If you were to go to Harvard or if you were to go to Yale right now and say, "I'm God," you're gonna get laughed at. What I mean? People are not as stupid as unfortunately Muslims paint people to be, right? People are actually very intelligent, very smart. People are very sharp at critical thinking, especially in the West, right? Like, what does this being have to do to convince the world that it's the creator of humanity? Like, that's like, if you really think about it, right? What do you have to actually do to actually convince people that you're God? It's something crazy and mind blowing. But yeah, that's a topic, inshallah, for a whole different time. Do you have, Dr. Shoaib, any closing remarks? Because inshallah we'll end in a few minutes. Just, from Islamic moral philosophical background on this whole topic of AI to begin with, and on just any final remarks, anything you really want to say, and you just need to get off your chest, right, about this topic.
I would say that, mashallah, this has been a good discussion, and I just hope that it triggers some ideas. I think most of my invitations are now really just around AI. Like, evolution is now a bygone conversation, it seems, and I think it's AI that is now picking up. So the next 4 conferences are all about AI, for instance. They've got nothing to do with evolution now. But just to take a step back, my advice is that number one, really understand the world that we're getting into. I think that Muslims, generally speaking, need a wake-up call, right? And I don't say this because I'm like, just exaggerating. I'm really not, right? I can tell you that I'm in one of the biggest hubs for AI. Edinburgh has its own in-house AI system, right? So I'm constantly hearing about some of the developments that are happening. Like, for example, the university has given free range for students to use AI. As long as you acknowledge it in your assignment, it's good to go, right? Like, they're very progressive about AI. So now, with that in mind, what I think we need to do is we need to have a serious wake-up call and just be aware of these conversations. Number one. Number two, I think we also need to be able to have a serious think about where we individually fit in within this broad conversation and this ecosystem. So I'll give you a concrete example. I am not in fintech. I have no clue about how to do business ventures, capital ventures. Yeah, that's not my area at all, right? My area, for example, is I am an academic. I train minds. That's what I do. So I try my best to look at, these classical ideas and being able to link them to contemporary conversations and bring other people on board so that there's room for agreement, disagreement, and we have a pool of knowledge that is new that people can use. That's where I see myself, right? I don't see doing myself any more than that. That's where I see it. But other people, for example, Yusuf, right? I definitely implore him to be the best person he can be in fintech. I expect other people who are not in fintech or maybe that or in politics, but at least be able to now push political strategies in place that are at least sensitive to the Islamic tradition, right? So each one of us has to play a role, has a part. And these don't necessarily have to be global positions. These can be localized. Like I'm here in Edinburgh. I'm not shaping policies in the UK. I'm not shaping policies in KSA. I'm just doing one thing at a university and then teaching here online. That's it. That's it. And I understand the sphere of my influence. I'd say we need to have a more realistic footprint like that. Be very, very calculative in terms of what we can do and be able to really develop the resources. If we don't have them, we develop them our own to be able to make those advances that I think that can be very constructive. I think that would be my advice to everyone, is to really have a very heart-to-heart, transparent conversation with yourself. Is what can you do to help the situation? And I think all of us will have different answers in place. And I think that'll be my parting advice, I guess.
Jazakallah khair. I mean, honestly, that it's really the advice people need to hear. Maybe don't want to hear, but they need to hear. Especially, in our communities. Yusuf, any last comments before we wrap?
Alhamdulillah, I think Dr. Shoaib wrapped it up very well. I would just say from a tech standpoint, a couple of advices, right? So one is for the new generation. As parents, I think we should encourage our kids to go the non-traditional route, right? Especially in the Indian subcontinent and in the Desi culture, we want our kids to be doctors and engineers. That's changing rapidly. Those jobs might not even exist, especially on the engineering side. We have to take up newer dimensions, and we have to encourage and be supportive of our kids going in that route. Secondly, from a professional standpoint, all of us who are either starting in professions or in mid to high level, again, don't fight AI. I think some of the discussions that are going on are still around whether AI will take jobs or not take jobs. Those are discussions that should have happened 3-4 years ago, not now. AI is here. AI is here. Use it as a tool, enhance your skills, use it for better productivity, climbing up the ladder. There are so many other positive things that you can do with it. So don't fight it, learn it and move on. So that's for professionals, right? For some of the senior leaders, I think both from an Islamic standpoint as well as those in the tech space, I think there is a lot of scope for collaboration where we have to come together and think of those things. Think of governance committees or think of governance frameworks for AI in healthcare, AI in fintech. We just think that, hey, there's no research paper on it and no one has written anything about it. Why don't we come together, academians, tech people, religious authorities, and let's start documenting some of those guardrails that we need to keep in mind. And lastly, think of innovation, right? We are far behind in this. I think we are good professionals, but we are lousy innovators. Honestly, I think that's what I have to say. But then we have to come forward and start the innovation mindset. There has to be ecosystems in place who would kind of encourage these innovations as well. Incubators and think tanks that will encourage the younger generation to come up with these ideas, give them a safe platform for them to discuss, try it out, implement things, pilot projects, and so on. That's missing in this space, and I think we should do something together as a community. I mean, our previous generations have done great jobs in building Islamic institutions, and they have played a big part in safeguarding our faith. It's time to take that one step further. It's not that we don't have physical spaces. We have spaces, we have people who can collaborate, we have people who can contribute. Let's all come together and create these programs and systems that will help us plan 10, 20, 50 years ahead.
SubhanAllah, beautifully said. Jazakumullah khair, yeah, to Yusuf and Dr. Shoaib. I know, yeah, both of you, your time is very precious, and this was a great conversation. Like I said, I literally have to run to the masjid to do a khutbah right now, and I'm like not even motivated. Like I want to change my topic so badly. Inshallah, I hope that whoever is viewing, inshallah, I hope this benefits you, empowers you, gives you some knowledge, gives you some gives you some how can I say, sense of a bit of security, but also a sense of urgency that we need to move, we need to act, we need to be ready for what's coming up next, inshallah. So with that, inshallah, we'll catch you all in our next podcast. Until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam. Jazakallah khair for hosting.
Barakallahu fik, Sidi.